So you can see there's several people represented in several departments. Myself and Yamina and Gordon and Deirdre are in natural resources management, environmental sciences. GW and I are both in ag engineering. Christina is in ag business. Anne is in ag communications. Peggy's in food science and nutrition, and Robin's in horticulture and crop science. So we had almost all of the departments represented. We wanted to see how effective online learning was for hands-on. We learn by doing. Many students we believe would struggle with online courses. Faculty and students both value face-to-face. Quality learning begins with quality online learning needs significant preparation. If it's a normal year, it goes through a lot of vetting through CSU, but that's not what happened last year. As you all know, we were forced into this. We didn't have time to prepare. We had about a week. Many faculty lack the pedagogical expertise and practical experience. So baseline instruction is presented. Students didn't choose to take an online course. And how is learn by doing applied in an emergency remote teaching environment? So our objectives were to understand how students perceived this quick change, evaluate the role of course type. We had lecture, activities, and labs all presented. Our hypotheses were that students would negatively perceive the ERT experience, and that the method of delivery, synchronous versus asynchronous, would have an impact on the perceptions of ERT. Unfortunately, I don't have time to present that part today. We sampled undergraduate and graduate students, but I'll just be talking about undergrads. We had demographic information, usefulness of content delivery, perceptions of support, and perceived impacts on learning outcomes. So we had some descriptive statistics, and we also used a chi-square analysis to test the differences across course types, that being lectures, labs, and activities. Students were asked to pick one support or major course to answer questions about. We had a Likert scale that had 5 levels: strongly agree, neutral, disagree, or strongly disagree, but we grouped the strongly disagree and disagree together, and agree and strongly agree together, or similarly very ineffective and ineffective, or so just for the analysis. So what did students think? So you can see that one of the first questions was course alignment. Were the assessments fair? You can see they're kind of all over the place. 42% said they were fair and 22% said they weren't. I'm not sure how this would compare to a normal, in-person year, but I know that students don't always think what we do is fair. Learning units were presented clearly. It was nice to see that almost 85% of the students said yes. Navigation between learning materials and the website was comfortable. That one did have a significant difference across lecture, lab, and activities. It's the only one in this list that did, but still almost 83% said they were comfortable with it. Of course, they may have been comfortable with Canvas before spring. Course structure and requirements were clear, mostly said yes, and almost 75% said guidelines were clear. What about their perceptions of motivation? So my instructor had empathy for the challenge. It was nice to see that the instructors in cafes, for the most part, were empathetic to the difficulties of our students. They believed that they were not able to interact with their professor as much as if it was in person, right? 76% said they could not interact with their professor, which is not really surprising. They believe that they're able to participate and interact with peers as much as in class. That one kind of surprised me. I would have thought they said no. They were connected to their professor. They're kind of all over the place, but more disagreed that they were connected. And this one was significant at the 0.01 level for a difference between lecture, lab, and activities. I think they thought they needed more interactions with labs. I believe they had the same educational opportunities, kind of all over the place, not too surprising. And they felt motivated to study for the class. About 63% said yes. Although when I asked my classes at the end of the quarter, they all said one thing they learned from going to this was that they needed to work on time management. What were their perceptions of the content? They did not think that faculty provided quality online instruction. And this is one of the things we were looking at. What did they think of going online? Well, they don't think almost 68% said that the instructors did not provide quality online assessment. But they did believe that professors were available when they had questions, although that was significantly different at 0.05 alpha across lecture, lab, and activity. The availability of online content helped me with time management. So that was nice to see, 78% did. And then the professor provided the ideal quantity of instruction. They disagreed. Doesn't say, we don't know whether they thought they needed more instruction or less instruction, but 70% of them said that we did not have the right quantity. Some open-ended questions. We asked them how their lab activities were completed. And as you can see, the professors in cafes became very creative. We had home-based experiments. We had discussion of lab activity based on videos created by the instructor. I know some soil science instructors took videos out into soil pits. PowerPoint pictures of step-by-step and synchronous Zoom meetings discussing an experiment. There were photos of cow judging. They were sent home lab kits to perform labs. They had to download apps on phones to enable them to go out and do surveying assignments. They had online videos of activities. So what are our conclusions? Students had a negative perception of emergency remote teaching. They did not like it. That was across all our course types. Over 2/3 of participants did not agree that their instructor provided the ideal quantity or quality of learning relative to face-to-face. Most preferred method of delivery were pre-recorded lectures and live Zoom classes. Students had somewhat negative perceptions of discussions. Nearly 2/3 of participants perceived online group work to be less effective than in person. We decided faculty needed training to effectively implement the discussion boards. Most of us aren't quite sure how to do that. Synchronous discussions allow better interactions. It's important to maintain some synchronous contact. Students did like to be able to see the professors, and we need to manage expectations. Faculty need to emphasize that doing will increasingly require digital technology. So just because it's online doesn't mean it's not doing. So we've done a really good job of selling Learn by Doing to our students. They pre-select Cal Poly and cafes because they want the Learn by Doing, and they didn't perceive online as Learn by Doing. So Learn by Doing facilitates the concrete learning experiences and teach marketable skills. So with that, are there any questions? And I'm going to stop sharing so I can actually see people.
Thank you, Samantha, for that summary. You were right on time with your time, so that's great. We have about 5 minutes to do any discussion.
So there is a question about demographics for this project, and yes, we did collect a great deal of demographic information. I just didn't have time to present it in this presentation. We also collected information on food security and economic hardships because of COVID.
Samantha, do you mind saying the representation of students across the college about?
about. I know that it was, I don't have it in front of me. It was fairly representative. There were more from the departments that were represented by the faculty. So natural resources management had more than the equal proportion within cafes, and some of the other departments did. I think animal science didn't have as many because there wasn't anyone from animal science in our group. Many faculty members bribed their students to fill this out by giving them extra credit. So we did have a little bit of a disproportion, but it wasn't extreme.
And I think it was more female than male respondents as well, but that I thought is consistent with the college, that there's a higher proportion of females in the college overall. So that wasn't,
Yeah,
that was in line.
I see Deirdre nodding her head. She did the statistical analysis, so she would know. Question, Dr. Thomas, I think you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you for recognizing my hand. So it sounds like the results kind of affirm what you expected, that students would perform in-person learning over online. Could you talk about the unexpected results, in particular, this idea of accessibility to their instructors and the fact that they felt they can connect with their peers?
Well, those really surprised me. I think this is more anecdotal than anything that was in the survey, but I think the faculty did a good job of making themselves available via email. I know I've talked to faculty who answered emails way more often during this COVID time period than when it wasn't COVID. I know I answer emails 7 days a week, pretty much from when I get up to when I go to bed. And so I think that's the availability, and I can't speak to why they felt connected to their peers. Deirdre just unmuted herself, so maybe she has some comments.
So I think it's probably a combination of two things. Is there's a lot of incidental contact that we have with our students in class, after class, in the hallways, that may increase the perception of availability, that once COVID hit, you literally were not here and had to be intentional about making contact with your faculty members. I think maybe the student part is, I think a lot of faculty started to engage in group projects as part of their modality, and that might have helped with the perception of that contact with their fellow students, is that group time that might have been cropping up. Yeah. So I think that's kind of where those two, I think the lack of incidental running into your faculty may increase the perception of a lack of connection and contact, in a way that if you've only been in, most students had some very limited experience with an online class. Most of them had taken like one over the course of their education. So their perception of what contact in an online class looks like was probably very different than the realities of online learning. So I think that's kind of where that came in.
Yeah, I know with my classes, they've all set up group me's also. So they also had that interaction with each other outside of the class structure.
And I think a lot of students kind of do that anyways. I know when I've taken classes at Cal Poly, a lot of classes have group me's as well. And so that creates that opportunity for interaction that they already had in play in a digital way that we didn't necessarily have to be intentional about creating.